Welcome back. And we were just hearing from Keith a really interesting story about someone and how they were journeying towards freedom.
Yeah, during the break, Rafa made a really good point where he said it's not just from family. And I think the example I was giving was about something that could happen in family, but a beautiful example of what healing and freedom from this came from, I was at a conference that was around healing on this topic, and a lady was sharing her testimony of finally hearing this truth and the freedom it was bringing for her. And she basically told the story that she had been married with 3 boys, and her husband was a high-powered CEO, and he died unexpectedly. And she made the commitment at that point that she was going to provide for her children at the same level he would have, and they were never going to want for anything. So for the next 30 years, she literally went into corporate America, became a CEO, became extremely successful. And what she was sharing, I don't know if you've ever seen someone cry with joy. What she was sharing, weeping with joy to this group, was that this truth of being able to reclaim identity, she had to be so masculine in a masculinized, competitive CEO world that now her children were safe and grown. And she was recognizing that the reason she was so sad and so depressed and had so much suffering is she was still living out that life, and that the deepest desire of her heart was to find someone to be loved again and to go and buy the dresses she used to wear before she went into corporate America and to reclaim beauty, because she felt like she had to give that up. And it was this beauty, you just saw this beautifully radiant feminine woman weeping with joy at the realization of why she had been so unhappy, even though what she was doing was selfless for her children. It was such a beautiful example of the woundedness of what she had to shift into, or she believed she did, to succeed the way she wanted to, and how much suffering went with that, and reclaiming this identity, and how much joy and peace came with that.
I think what you mentioned about identity is so important, because even in my life, we're talking about healing. Those moments where I've received healing, it all comes back to identity. Because I think if we look at even wounds and brokenness, it's just false identities that we believe, right? So things that we believe about ourselves that are not true, that we believe because of experience, things that have happened in our lives. And healing, yes, it's something that goes to a great depth, and something that, you walk through with Jesus and in prayer. But at the root of it, it's just the Lord, telling you who you are, as a son of God, right? As a daughter of God. And reclaiming that identity, and learning to live from that truth, as opposed to from the lies.
And one of the reasons why I mentioned family, Keith, you were talking about that, is family is who we spend most of our time with. So it's natural, and they bring us up. So it's one of the reasons why we look to family when we're talking about wounds. But it's not just in family. It's in friendships. It's in school. You can think back to your elementary school days and how many wounds may have come up from some of that stuff. But it's important to realize that it's whenever we're encountering other human beings, and it's in moments when, there's that quote that the only true response to another human when we encounter them is love, right? And so any time in our lives, really, when we've encountered other humans and there wasn't love, there's wounds. And so that's why we go back and identify some of those.
The irony of that is like we were saying before, that need to lock up our hearts when we've been wounded, to not want to love. And I always remember this quote from C.S. Lewis that says, the only place our heart's going to be free is if we put it in a casket. And there, no one's going to be able to touch it. The light's not going to hit it. It'll be safe. But it's going to become impenetrable and hardened. And it's going to lose its ability to love. And the only way to move forward is to actually be vulnerable, which is something that Joe was saying in the interview. And it's just such a scary thing to be vulnerable, because putting yourself out there and telling the person, this is who I am and this is what I'm about, and wanting to be loved despite of it. Sometimes it doesn't happen and it hurts, but other times, because we dare to, we get strengthened by it. And I always think of Jesus, his vulnerable love. He wasn't afraid to love, to the point that he was nailed on a cross and still loving. And look at what that love did. It saved all of us.
And what we spoke about earlier is freedom to love, right? What we desire is the freedom to love and the freedom to be loved. And so reclaiming identity, which you spoke so beautifully about identity, it is scary and it is terrifying, because it might mean a real change from the false way we're living. But the whole point of it is the beauty and the freedom. The peace, I think, is such a great word. The peace that comes with living authentically and knowing our God-given identity. And when we reclaim that, it's amazing how many storms we can weather when we know who we are and who we belong to, instead of trying to craft this identity to adjust for the wounds that we receive. So I think this is what freedom is.
Yeah. Well, something that just came to my mind all of a sudden was St. Augustine's quote where he says that finding God or loving God is the greatest romance and seeking him is the greatest adventure. And that's just something that came to mind, and just want to encourage everyone, before we even venture out to love others, the first thing we need to do is seek out God and his love for us and recognize who he is in our lives and learn from him what it means to love. And right now, let's cut to a song that we have from Joe, and we'll come back in a second.
You have woven desire into secrets of my heart. And to even want to begin to want you is the start. Seeing you, chosen me before I even knew I wanted you. And you had loved me first and made it so that I could love in return. The heart doesn't long for what the eyes not see, and I wouldn't seek unless I really. The heart doesn't long for what the eyes not see, and I wouldn't seek unless I really. Lord, I really. Lord, I really, Lord, I really found you in some way. Lord, I found you in some way. I found you in some way.
So that was a really great song, and just to encourage everyone to check out his music online. I definitely loved a lot of it, and it spoke a lot of truth. And just before we close out, you guys, have any closing thoughts you want to share? Or we've said it all for now.
I just go ahead.
No, just to chime in on, again, even we talked about wounds and brokenness, and we've talked about healing, but again, it's this temptation to think that that these things are normal. Living like this is normal, and something that we have to always remind ourselves and keep in mind is in the beginning it was not so. It's not normal. It's normal because of our fallen world, our fallen humanity, original sin. But it's being able to reclaim that, and not being scared to go there, because we don't go there alone, right?
Yes.
We go there with Jesus. So.
Right, just how he had victory on the cross through him, by loving through him, by going through those wounds and reclaiming that. With him, we have that same victory that he had on the cross.
On the winning team.
Yeah. Think about that Garden of Eden, that phrase, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh at last. It's just a statement of love and acceptance and givenness. And that's what we're made for, is just to be able to give that profound statement of love to each other.
Have a great week.
Thank you.
Have a good one.